Hey there everybody, and welcome back to the next video in the updated how to create a social or sharing app playlist. In today's video, I'm going to be walking you through the next step, which is the user account page. So the last video was actually setting it up to where users could access and log into our app, and this would be the landing page they would get to. If yours is blank, that's not a problem. That's because obviously you're not working with the finished product. So you can make your home pages, pause the video here, kind of build things out however you want. But what we're going to be focusing on is the user account page. So as you could guess, most accounts or most websites are going to have some kind of a page where you can log in and maybe see a profile picture, maybe see your email, username, your About Me section, an update profile button, a sign out button. These are all, some pretty typical things. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting up this page. Now, if you want a navigation bar like this, that's going to be closer to the end of the series. So right now we're building out that core functionality and getting the more difficult and just kind of boring stuff out of the way. So what we're going to do is we're going to log into our app, and then you can go ahead and make a new page and link it however you want to your home page. This is going to be an ongoing process. Now, one thing to note is in order to get to that page, you're going to want to have some logic set up. So you shouldn't necessarily need this every time you access this page. However, you can do it on the page load or when you're actually sending users to that page. So it's entirely up to you. So what I mean by page load is when you click on page loadout on any page in your app, you'll see a bunch of or potentially no items, depending on if you've already worked with it. This is what your app does when the page loads. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our My Account page. So when you log in, I just have called mine My Account. Now you may want to pause the video here and add in the different spots or features that you need. So I have a title up top saying My Profile. I have an image tied to the app variable profile picture. So a couple of variables that you're probably going to need off the bat is the one that I just mentioned, and we're going to need some page variables as well. So I'm using chat1, chat2, chat3, and username. So I would recommend you go ahead and make those page variables now. And then an app variable called profile picture. So now you can drag your image over and then tie it to a formula, and I just have mine set to appVars.profilepicture. If it looks like there's an error, don't worry about it. It will work. It's just tying it to a URL. So it's only going to load if there's a URL there. And then here, what I've done is I have a formula, and here's the way that this is set up. I have a quote, the word email with a semicolon and a space and a quote, and then space plus space, appVars.myemail. So the idea here is this is going to display to users saying, this is the email, and then it'll load the app variable whenever it's available. So you will also need to go ahead and in your app variables, create one that's my email. Next up, we have username. So you're going to need to go create an app variable for username. And again, these are very quick processes. And then you can just type in the formula field, username, and this is in quotes again because this is static text. It's not changing. And then you're adding, which is basically kind of like concatenating, which just adds in the username whenever it's available. So in this case, you'll see right here, this is what it's going to display. This is my username. This is the email. So we have those two set up. Then we go to About Me, and we'll repeat the process and have an app variable for About Me. And again, if you don't have that, you can go ahead and create it. Then I've added a list divider just because I think it helps to make it look a little bit cleaner. And you can just find those over here under the lists section and drag and drop. Now, this part may get confusing for some people. So just to kind of help streamline this a bit, this update profile container. So when you first go to this page, you don't see anything underneath these two buttons. When you click it, then the container appears. So this update profile does not actually update the profile. I've dragged over a button and I've selected the style, and you can change the color, but typically with buttons, you have a couple of options. So when you go to style, most of the time if we drag over, let's just drag over a standard button, it'll be this pretty traditional blue color. But in the Style tab, you can choose different colors if you want. So I've just selected this one for secondary. Now, when we select the button, we are going to do the following things. So we're going to start with showing the component, which is called Update Profile Details. Then we're going to show the component Update Profile Container. Now, these are not visible currently. So what I've done is we have Update Profile Details right here, which is a button that you can add, and then a container saying Update Profile Container. So the Update Profile Details button, you'll see, and then we have the Update Profile Container. So we'll go over what that actually looks like in a minute, but we're going to go through just so you can add in all of these components. So for now, just put show component and add in another show component, and then add in a hide component. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go to installed, go to get user Firebase authentication, and that's just going to be this one right here. And connected to the top is set app variable. So you'll need to make sure you have an app variable called temp profile URL, spelled just like this. And then you're just going to drag over the set app variable and connect it to the top node. If you want, you can have a toast message connected to the bottom two for the errors, but I'm not worried about it. Then we have our app variable here. And what we are going to set it to is the output of another node, user ID. So in this case, what we're doing is we're saying get the current user from Firebase, and then here we're going to go to get the user, and then we're going to say find that user's ID. The reason we're using this is Firebase assigns a unique ID to every user, so this gives us a way to tie records to that user. Then we're going to put get record profile details. Now in this case, you will need this profile details data record. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to go over to Firebase, and we're going to need to create a new record. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this side by side just to make sure that we don't miss any steps. So on the left, I have a sample database that I've used before, and then on the right, I have the database that we're working with that we've just created. So what we'll do is we're going to go to Firestore database, and if you're following along, yours should be empty. Over on the right, or over on the left, I apologize, we have profile details. This is what we're calling the profile details collection. And then within that is the document for our profile. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to have these three documents. Right now, you don't need those at all. So we're just going to, in our database, click Start Collection, and we'll call it Profile Details. And then you'll click Next. So for Document ID, in this case, you can just click Auto ID. Now we need a couple of fields. In this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we will add 6 fields, and we'll start with About Me, and then Chat 1, Chat 2, Chat 3, Profile Picture, and then Username. So feel free to pause it here if you want to get caught up, and then we're just going to move forward with Save. Now you should have a document just like this. So at this point, we're somewhat caught up. So now we're going to actually have the ability to get this information. And what I mean by that is we're going to be using the API. So we will pause this for just a second so that we can get this part set up essentially. So we will go to the Data tab. And again, you're not going to have this many. Don't worry about it. you're going to create a resource. So click Add Data Resource, REST API Direct Integration. Your page should now look blank. I'm going to show you what mine looks like and show you what to copy and what not to. So I would recommend naming your resource ID Profile Details with a capital P, just in case you need to spell it out later. The description doesn't really matter because it's not tied to anything important. And then you're going to need this URL, which I will put in the description of this video. The only thing you're going to need to change is what's right here. To make it easier, I'm going to put some text in all caps. It'll probably be something like project name in all caps. And what this is going to be is the project ID. If you remember a couple videos back, we mentioned the fact that our project is technically called test123, but the ID is right here. That's that thing that we should have saved. You should also see it in the URL up top. So in this case, you're going to type out or copy and paste this in, and then after the slash next to projects and before the slash next to databases, you'll type out your project ID here and make sure that you have this full URL ending in the word documents. Then we're going to go to get collection. So in this case, I'll show you how this will look for me. I know that this is my project ID right here. So I'll copy this and I'll paste it over top of the current project. I'll put get for the record collection. And you'll see we have this relative path. This should look familiar. This is what was on the previous page. So you're just going to put in slash profile details. This is basically pointing it to our collection. In response key path, you'll type out documents and then go to test. Now, when you click run test, the majority of the time you should get an API error the first time around, and here is why. When we set up our database, we set up rules that blocked it. So this is where I'm going to go ahead and tell you I'm opening my database, but you need to make sure that you're managing your security rules and policies and user data in accordance with whatever relevant laws, rules, guidelines, regulations, etc. So I don't recommend having an open database. I'm going to at this point because I'm going to be deleting this afterwards. So by saying allow read write if true, I'm basically saying just read and write whenever. It was false before, and that's why it was giving us an error. Now, if right here, this is where you would have logic to help with making this a more secure database. So you can look up documentation for what your rules should look like. So now when we go back and click run test, you'll notice all of a sudden we have data. And this should look familiar. These are all of the fields that we added in not too long ago. So at this point, you can click Set Schema from Response and click Save. Now, what you're going to do next is go to Get Record, and you should see slash profile details, and you're just going to make it look just like this. So we have this part, which we've already added, and you're just going to have slash profile details slash bracket ID bracket. And this is basically the way that this is going to work is when you go to test, you can type in the ID field this ID. So just as a sample, I would recommend following along. Go into Firestore, into what you just created, and click on the document. And you should see up at the top this document name. You don't need to copy the whole thing. For example, I have 2F added in, which I think could be like a space or some kind of a delimiter or something like that. So we're just grabbing the document name, and then we're going to go back here and type it in the ID field and click Run Test. And you'll see it worked. So everything's working as expected. So at this point, you'll click Save Changes, and then you're going to go back to your home page. Now I'm going to go ahead and revert this really quickly, primarily because I want to make sure that it's tied to a database with actual data. So you do not need to revert yours. Your record is set up. So now at this point, what you need to do is you should be back at this home screen or this page in the app. And you're on this button's logic. again, the page layout, the way that this is set up is we are getting our user data. So what we're going to be doing now is kind of going back a couple of steps and going through page loadout start to finish. So I know we were previously working on the update button. Don't worry about that. What we're going to do now is we're going to click page loadout and make sure that this page loads correctly. So first thing we're going to do is under page mounted, put get current user, make sure that you have all of this set up correctly. So we're going to set the app variable to the output of get current user. In this case, you already know the process. We've done it several times. And then connected to that, we're going to have get record. Now you should be able to find that over here in the data section. So get record, you're going to connect to app variable. When you're getting a record, if you have issues with this node, it's because there's something wrong in this tab here. So in our case, we're going to get record and we're going to choose the resource name. And these are all the data resources. You're just going to select profile details. And then for the ID, you're going to set the formula to appVars.temp_profile_URL. Now, if you remember, you should already have created this. And what this is doing is this is saying we're getting the user from Firebase saying who's logged in. Oh, it's this person. Well, then we're going to set the app variable to their user ID. And then when we're going to get the record, we're going to say, okay, grab the profile details collection. And I just want the one record for this current user. Then we are going to set these three variables. They are all page variables. So on page load, we'll set chat1, chat2, and chat3. And what we're going to do is go to assigned value. And we are going to go to, you'll see, we can go to the get record, which is basically just this right here. So when we set the page variable, choose chat1, output of another node, get record, and then you're looking for the string value under chat1. Now you'll notice all of these variables or all of these records are what we just set up over here in our database. So you'll just choose chat1, you'll repeat the process and you'll set page variable 2, chat2, output, and you're just setting it to, just like this one, you're setting it to the output of another node, get record, and then chat2 string value. You'll repeat the process here for chat3. And then we have our page load set up. So I would recommend pausing the video, take a quick break, and then we will jump straight in. All right, so next thing is up. At this point, we are going to finish up this complicated series we were working on just a couple minutes ago. So first things first, you're going to want to have a button somewhere on your page, and it's just going to be called Update Profile Details. So just drag over a button, set the visible value to false, which we've already done. If you don't know what that means, any of your components, you can click them, go to their properties, and see if they're set to visible or not. So the button, we'll call it Update Profile Details, and then we're going to have a component, which is a container. So what containers are is a little bit complicated and easy to explain at the same time. So this is what a container looks like. It's just this little rectangle with a dotted line. You can put stuff within a container to move it around and make it easier to navigate with. So you'll see these two items are contained within the container. So this makes it easier to move them, hide them, do whatever it is you may need to do, or even just add in spacing between components. So in this case, I have a container. I dragged it over and clicked it, and I called it Update Profile Container. So you'll see visible is set to false. I recommend you do the same. And then call it Update Profile Container. In that container, we are going to have input fields. So we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then a container after. And so these first four are input fields. The last one is a button called update. So all you need to do is drag your input field into your container and drag 4 of them, and then drag in a button and just call it update. Now if you're a little confused, here's what this means. When we log into the app and we go to our profile, when we click update, it's showing these input fields and the update button. So in this case, we have about me input, which is right here. We have set avatar URL, which is this right here. We have input to, which is the username. And then we have a list divider and then an update. So you need, 3 input fields, a list divider, and update. You don't have to worry about setting these all to invisible or not visible because they're in a hidden container. So you're going to drag over 3 input fields, list divider, and a button. The first input, you're just going to have the label say about me, and the value is going to be, you're going to go to your app variables and call it the app variable for about me. So you'll just click here, data and variables, app variable, about me. If you don't have one, just click the slider and add it. Then we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to call this one whatever you want. I put the label here saying picture. This is just an image URL because this app does not allow you to upload files. And then we are going to tie this to profile picture, which is an app variable. Then the last input is going to be called username, and it's going to be tied to the app variable username. The list divider, there's nothing to update. And then we have the update button. We're going to come back to the update button in a minute. So now we're going to finish this up. So at this point, you have show component. When you click the component options, the first one you're wanting to show is the update profile details, which is basically if you have the button hanging outside of the container. Then we are going to show update profile container. Now, you don't technically need both of these because we have the button in the container, but I forgot to delete one. It's not going to hurt it to show it. So we're basically showing the component that we've already set to hide. So if this is confusing, you should have set this update profile container to not visible by default. So now when we click this button, this is going to be shown. Then we're going to hide button, and you're going to just find the one that says this component. So when we click show, for example, when we load the page, if I click update profile, I want that button to go away. So you'll click hide and choose that button. Make sure you should already have this from before, but you'll drag over your auth get current user, which should be installed over here. The top node will be connected to set app variable, and this should look familiar. We're setting app variable temp profile URL to get user ID. So just like we did before, you're just clicking output of another node, get user ID. Technically, we shouldn't need to do this because we've done it on page load, if I'm not mistaken, but you get the idea. So we're going to go to get record, just like we did before. We're going to choose the profile details and the UID, which is the temp profile URL. That's just that app variable. So what we're saying is, hey, do this get record call. We now have the user's ID. We want their information. And then you're going to connect the top node to set page variable. And we're going to set the page variable username to, and we'll do this together. We'll click right here, output of another node, and then you can go to get record, and you should have a username record string value, and click save. Now we're going to put an if condition. This one's moderately critical. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to go to core, and then we will put in here. So you're going to scroll through and find your if condition, which we've used at least a couple times before, and drag it over. So we're going to put is_empty, and then in parentheses, page vars appVars.username. So basically we're doing a check for if it's empty or not. And then if it's true, we'll put show input name username. So we're going to show the component, and you'll see it's basically just this component. So we'll allow username to be visible. Now this is entirely up to you if you want to do this. But the idea here is if this is false, so if the username field is empty, we're going to show the username input. If it is not empty, then we're going to hide button 2. We're going to show the second sign out. I'm going to walk you through what each of these are. You'll see I have this one duplicated, so obviously we only need it once. But the idea here is we're hiding button 2. We're showing the second sign out button. We're hiding button 2, so you'll see that one's a copy and paste, so you don't need both of these. So we can delete this one, and we can delete this one. So you need hide button 2, show component second side out, and hide component username input. Basically, we're hiding the input if they already have a username so that they can't change it. That's your choice if you want to enable or disable that. So button 2 up here is just the sign out button. So you can add in a button. In my case, it's below the update button. You can just put that button there. So we're opting for whether or not we want that to be visible. So we will move this down and go back. So we'll add your button, call it sign out. You can make it red if you want, and we're just going to hide it here. We're going to show second sign out. So we'll walk through what that is in a minute. And then we're going to hide username input, which, if you remember, is just this right here. So we just don't want them to input a second username. So second sign out, if we scroll through, you'll see second sign out is just that sign out button. So that's really all that there is to it as far as the basics of this page. So at this point, if you're a little bit confused, I would recommend go into AppGyver and make everything visible. It helps to reduce confusion a lot. The idea for this page is when you get here, we're going to click Update Profile URL. We're going to get these 3 inputs and have the ability to click this button to make changes. So now we're going to walk through what that button does, and then we'll basically be finished with this page. So in our Update Profile container, we have a button called Update. So what we're going to do is on Component Tap, we're going to do the Get User function, which we've done before, again, under Installed. And we're going to have a toast message saying error, try again later, connected to the bottom 2 nodes. Connected to the top one, we're going to set temp profile URL to what we've been setting it to, the user ID. So you can follow the steps that we did literally just a minute or 2 ago. It's the output of other node, get current user, UID. And then we're going to do a data request. So in this case, you're going to drag over your data HTTP request, and you will use this URL. Now, in this case, we're going to need to add a new app variable, and you should already have an app variable for temp profile URL. I will paste this whole URL in the description if you're interested. And then this is going to be a delete call, so you don't need anything added in. I have actually decided to hide the update component regardless of whether this succeeds or fails. You can choose to do that if you would like. And then we're going to hide component profile, update profile details, because I don't want users to be hitting the button a bunch. And then we're going to go to the data, and we're going to add a new post. So in the description, I'll put the delete as well as the post. The post URL is going to be this right here, and we'll make this app variable in a minute. And then the post is going to be this request body, which I will paste in the description. This should look familiar. So what we're doing is we're saying in Firebase, where it says About Me, put in the app variable for About Me. So at this point, pause the video after you hear what I'm about to say to make sure that you have these variables. You want to make sure you have an app variable for about me and username and profile picture. Then you want to have a page variable for chat 1, chat 2, chat 3. If you paste this in from the description and any of these are red, it's because either you don't have that variable, bearing in mind there are a combination of app and page variables, or you named yours something different, so you need to modify that. And what this type is just JSON. Then we'll show a component, so if you want, you can have a back button. Just drop in a button anywhere on your page, and you'll just call the button back. And then it can just take you back to the home page or whatever you want it to do. Then we have a toast message tied to the bottom two nodes saying error, try again later, and then the update at the top saying updated. Now, a couple of things to note here. Normally it would be bad practice to have a delete button that, whether it fails or succeeds, continues. The reason I've set this up this way is when you first log into the app, you don't have a profile to delete. So you need to create the record. So when someone goes to update their profile, it's going to delete it. If there's nothing to delete, it's still going to move forward and post the updated information. So I know that was a lengthy process. The last thing we need to do is get this sign out button working. And that's very simple. On component tap, you'll need to go to the marketplace and find sign out user. And then once you've done that, connect both nodes to open page Firebase authentication. Once you've done that, go through, make sure that you have all of your page layout stuff set up correctly. Make sure you aren't getting any errors. Log in. You should be able to start testing out this page once you go and actually click the update button. So it's sending the data from here, here, and here when you post it, and you'll see profile updated. And that's really all that there is to it. And then you'll get that record over here in Firebase. So if you want to test it side by side, we'll do that and then jump into the next video. So if you want to test it, you can find your update profile container, find your update button, and then for your HTTP request, for example here, we have our post. You're going to make sure that your project name is set correctly. So this is the last step. So we're going to go to variables, app variable, project name. Here you need to set your initial value to the name of your project. In this case, if our project name is this right here, then we would set this as the variable and click save. This is critical because this is where your app is going to know throughout this video and series where to send the data. So you'll see that your app will update. I'm going to go to my profile, click update container, and it may look a little odd, but we're going to try this side by side because this is pulling from one database, and when I post, it's going to post to a different one. So we're going to click update and see what happens. Now, in this case, I'm getting an error because I'm, again, getting from one database and posting to another. So we will see if anything came through on this one, so we can refresh the page. So this is kind of how you troubleshoot. In this case, when we are clicking on the update button, and we go down to update, you'll see we have a couple of things that are happening. So we're looking for the toast message that says error. So in this case, we are doing the get current user from Firebase, which could actually be where the error is occurring. And then we have set app variable URL, HTTP request, so we're trying to delete from the project name, which I guarantee you is giving us an error because we don't have that record visible because we haven't created an account yet. So it should still attempt to move on and then go here to post to this information. So we're posting to profile details, basically this data. So if you want to troubleshoot further, which yours should be working by now because I haven't actually updated mine, you can go to the Network tab when you right-click and click Inspect, and we're going to slide this over just a bit. What you can do is when you click on, we'll go back, and we'll try to expand this. I'm not sure why it's so small. We're going to go to our profile, update, and then if you scroll down in the Network tab in the console and click Update, if you get an error, you should see what the error is. So in this case, we're getting an error for delete, and then we're getting an error to post the document to profile details. So in this case, you'll see that the project is listed as undefined, so it's not pulling in the correct project name. So what I will do here is, if you wanted to, you could update your app variable for project name. Doesn't look like it's pulling it through correctly. And another thing to note, because I'm doing this I'm going between two different apps, my browser could be caching. So the idea here would be, if you're looking to troubleshoot, open up your console, see what your errors are, and then try to find the corresponding errors in this chain. Now, if I set everything back to the way that it should be, for example, profile details, I need to change my app variable back to the sample do not delete for the correct project. So at that point, everything should be working because it would now be connected to the correct Firestore database. So I know that this is a bit jumpy, and I apologize for that. It's quite a few steps to go through, but at this point, if you're having any issues, here's all you need to remember. Click on each of the components on the page. Make sure that their value is set to true for visible so that you can troubleshoot. You can view all the components in the tree, whether they're visible or not, right here. And then if you're having issues with a component being visible or not visible, remember they're all down here. And then once they're all visible, scroll through and just think, okay, this button, all it's doing is showing another button and getting us some data ready. If we click on the update button and we're getting an error, at what point could the process be broken? That's where you would use the console we were just looking at. See, where does it say the error is? And then you would go back and say, okay, we're looking at this app right here. Go in, like I said, use the console and see if you can just kind of troubleshoot and figure out, okay, it'll tell you where it's doing the post to, where it's getting the data from. So in this case, for example, if we wanted to add in a letter, since we made that change, does it now work? Now it's working because we have the correct information added. And you can tell by going to Inspect. And in the Network tab, if there's no errors, for example, if I click on Back and I go back to the update, if I click Update, on the right-hand side, you can see what's failing and what isn't. Sometimes there are going to be errors that aren't actually there or aren't necessary for you to look into, and sometimes there won't be. So you just need to go through here and figure out, okay, profile details, it did a get call, it's working as expected, no problem. Now, that's all for the profiles page. In the next video, we're going to walk through going through other pages of the app and basically navigating back to the My Profile page. There's some back-end logic we're going to set up, and then we'll walk through the rest of the app.